Next, I have the pleasure of introducing another forerunner in this fight, and her name is Jenni White, and she is the president of Restore Oklahoma Public Education.
Thank you, Joy. It's a blessing to see everybody here tonight, and I truly
Amen.
appreciate you taking your Tuesday night to come out and listen to this. And what I'm going to give you here, hopefully in just a second, there we go, is kind of a fire hose, a drink from a fire hose, and I really apologize for that. It's so hard. I usually talk for about an hour. It's very hard to get me down to less than 15 minutes. So I'm going to spring through this really quickly, and hopefully if you have any questions, we can talk about them here in a little bit. Okay, what is a state longitudinal database system? I've put as much up here as I possibly can so that you can read with me, an old educator trick. It helps you to stick it in your head. What is it? Well, it helps education departments monitor and make specific changes to advance their education reforms. This was actually something that Arnie Duncan said. These data systems will capture data on students from one grade to the next, measuring whether they are on track to graduate and telling K-12 schools whether they're preparing students to succeed in college and the workforce. I thought schools could do that on their own. Certainly as an ex-teacher, I did that for my kids. The data systems can also help identify teachers who are succeeding so states can reward them and find teachers who are struggling and help them improve. Or you could say maybe get rid of them.
Yeah.
All right, so what is an SLDS? Well, an SLDS is also called a P20 or a P20W, where P stands for pre-K, 20 stands for 20 years of age, and W is workforce. They're frequently overseen by an unelected board of governors of a kind, but they're unelected. It's all bureaucratic. Many of the councils that are created from these are actually put into state law. Our P20 council was actually put into state law. Why? Well, because the Race to the Top application that we took said that you get more points for putting it in state law because that allows them to be assured that we're going to follow those reforms. So there you go. All right. We like to do a lot of memes at Rote because I think it helps people kind of put pictures, kind of help people learn. And so what I'd like you to see here is what we like to call the 4 pillars of education reform. And it's actually America's education takeover by, unfortunately, the Obama administration. And what you have here is you have the Common Core state standards, a state longitudinal database, teacher accountability measures, and something called a turnaround of low-performing schools. All of these 4 things were present from the very beginning when President Obama was elected and he gave out ERA funds. Do you remember that? Stimulus funds. Well, the very first thing that happened was states took something called the State Fiscal Stabilization Funds, or SFSF funds. And these 4 pillars were actually present as something that states had to begin doing if they were going to get their SFSF funds. So that goes all the way back to 2009. So then from there, we've had Race to the Top, which Linda just told you about, and No Child Left Behind, don't forget parts 1 and 2, and then also an early learning challenge. So to say that the federal government is not involved in this, whether they were involved in creating the standards or not, they certainly had an excellent hand in being able to force them upon states or allow states to take them, creating lots and lots of strings. In the very first ESEA, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which was put into place by Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1965, it actually required data collection of schools, which is odd because computers took up rooms and rooms at that time, if you'll remember, but it did. But also in that very same piece of legislation, it forbade, it prevented the federal government from ever having any kind of nationalized standards or a nationalized database that would take students' personal information. Well, actually, since that particular time, we've kind of overwritten those laws. They've never been repealed. We just kind of have forgotten about them and do our own thing. This is the little map that we created all the way back in 2010 when we very first started studying Common Core and the Race to the Top. If you look at that, this is a mapping of the 4 pillars. So the blue is Common Core, the yellow is recruiting teachers and the turnaround schools, and then the red is all the money that was from the federal government from ERA. Does anybody see what the largest part of this particular map is? What color is it? Green, actually, outside of red. I should have said, I always do that. I should point out, beyond the money, what's the largest part of the map?
The green.
It's green. And do you know what green is? Data collection systems. So are the 4 pillars of education reform, is it really about education or is it about data? I think this particular slide illustrates what it really is about very well. All right, we need to talk very quickly about what is FERPA and what is PPRA. FERPA is the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act, which is supposed to protect students from having records shared, educational records shared with anybody so that their private information is not made public. Well, the only problem is that in January 12 of last year, Arnie Duncan himself actually went to the federal agency that regulates FERPA and said, you know what? Your rules are having, and he said this exact word, a chilling effect on our ability to collect data on students. Therefore, we need you to kind of back off on that and let us be able to get at these student records. So really, that's exactly what happened. So FERPA went from being a very strong law to being almost a non-existent law. It's certainly very weak today. So what's PPRA? It's the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. It's actually intended to help families, students and families, by any time there's a Fed Ed program, something that comes specifically with money from the federal government. Parents have the right to inspect those materials, and then not only that, but they're supposed to be able to allow parents, or they're supposed to make parents give them written consent to allow their children to take part in any kind of surveys, analysis, evaluations that reveal personal information, religion, income, political affiliations, attitudes, or behaviors. Did anybody even know about that law?
No.
Well, here's an interesting thing. If you find that that's happening in your school, I have 5 kids. When I had a 7th grader in school, I warned her about taking behavioral tests, and I kind of told her what it looked like. She came home and she said one day, and she said, oh, Mom, I got one of those. And I said, what did you do? And she said, I just turned it over on my desk and said, my mother won't allow me to take this. And I said, and I never had any problem with the school about it. That was just kind of an end of the thing. But it happens frequently in middle school that you will get these behavioral surveys. I think about my parents. When I'm upset, I get, and it's just kind of an open-ended fill-in-the-blank questions. These are really concerning. If you get one of these things and your school has not allowed you to come in and sign a waiver saying that, you can actually report this, and there's an address right there. I hope you've been writing it down since I'm going to flip the slide in like 13 seconds. You can file a complaint letter. The only problem is where you file a complaint letter with the federal government. So there you go. With the fox who's guarding the hen house. Okay. So what is HIPAA? Well, HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. We've always all heard about that. FERPA deals with school records. HIPAA actually deals with HIPAA records, or health records, I'm sorry. But here's something that happened when Arnie Duncan had the FERPA laws changed. I don't know if you know this or not, but inside your school, if you have a school, that light is right in my eye. If you have a clinic of any kind, a health clinic on site, anything that happens to your child in that health clinic, there have to be records. Anybody will tell you that. A school nurse has to have records of who she saw in her office. But the problem is that those records fall now under FERPA because HIPAA is actually superseded by FERPA. So a lot of these federal grants that schools are getting now to create healthcare centers on the campus or in their school certainly wipes out any privacy you had with your healthcare records, and I think it's really important that people know that. All right, what kinds of data can be shared other than health records? Well, here's what I did. I always like to work in screenshots because a lot of people say, you're crazy, that's not happening, you're making that up. Well, I've actually been told I have a tinfoil hat on, which is okay because it matches my hair, and I'm all good with that. But here's the thing, I don't want you to think that I'm making it up, so I take screenshots of everything. And this is a screenshot from the National Education Data Model, which is actually a federal program that's run that collects data on students. I can't go into all of this. As I said, it's going to be a drink from a fire hose as it is. But these are some of the kinds of fields that are available to your state and your district and your school to collect information on students. So what would those be? Well, we have an employment end date. We have lots of things having to do dwelling ownership, what their education is planned, what their residence is after exiting or withdrawing from school. Why do you need to know that? That's interesting. What your religious affiliation is, your religious consideration, your voting status, whether or not you're a ward of the state, what your work experience is. I don't know about you, but I'm not comfortable giving just about any of that to anybody. So I just wanted you to know what's available there. So why would any teacher, school, or state need to give the federal government so much information? So why do we care about student privacy? What is the actual big picture here? Well, that's the big picture. And I hate to do that to you because it's kind of a daunting slide. Trust me, I made 3 of them one time when I went up to South Dakota to give a presentation on data and how data collection is being done. And it was frightening even for me to put this together, if you want to know the truth. But what, ooh, and hello, she can't operate that. Okay, so here's what I want you to know. Schools now have the same operating system. It's called the SIF, School Interoperative Framework. Would anybody like to know who financed that? Oh my goodness, Bill Gates, did I hear? Yes, exactly, that's exactly who that is. It's a Microsoft product, shockingly enough. And so what happens is that SIF is kind of like the road. And I try to explain it to this to see if I can get people to understand it this way. SIF is the road. So you pull your car out here you're a student, and you log into a for-profit education vendor, Pearson McGraw, something that's through your school. That data then goes to the local school, then it goes to the district, then it goes to the State Department, then it goes to the National Center for Educational Statistics, then it goes to the Institute of Education Sciences, and from there it goes a veritable plethora of places that you would actually be shocked to find. And I was laughing because when I was doing the program for South Dakota, we were during the government shutdown, and I would go and try to get information from these websites on data, and they would have this big box that said, nah, you can't get on here. The government shut down. So I always wondered about how much does it cost to run a website? How many people are actually employed keeping that? But they were shut down. Here's the thing. This particular program, and this is what I need you to know, the way they have worked data sharing now is what they call seamless. So once your child enters information into the school and the school enters it, and by the way, I'm not faulting teachers, I'm not faulting administrators, I'm actually not faulting because a lot of the people that I talk to have no idea this is going on. Talked to a real sweet little girl in Canton who was actually a school secretary, and she started crying and said, I didn't mean to enter in all of that data. And she thought, like, no, don't cry. But I just need you to know what's going on so that you're aware of that, and it doesn't just end up, I mean, you have to know what's going on. Also, too, you'll notice a little something up here called the Data Quality Campaign from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the School Interoperative Framework with SIF, the State Longitudinal Database System, and all of these things, they all collect together. So your State Department is actually sending information out to agencies inside the state because of memorandums of understanding that they've made with other agencies like the Department of Corrections, for example, the Department of Health, all those kinds of places. And here's the other thing that I want you to know. My husband is a computer programmer, and every time that I would get on and look at this, I would ask him to help me understand it. And he helped me to understand it, much to my chagrin. I understood more than I wanted to know. But here's the thing. They all say, we're not taking personal data from students. We're not doing that. Well, here's your counter to that. Ask somebody who actually is a programmer. Once you attach a data field to another field, they're virtually inseparable.
Amen.
So it doesn't matter how many times you push delete, delete, delete. If you join them together at one point in time on that seamless data highway of SIF, it's going to go anywhere it wants, and your child will be able to be individually recognized. There's just simply no way to get around that. They actually do even say that they want data to be at the granular or personal level with the ability to share aggregate, which is non-personal data. Now, because such companies such as Pearson are developing their own online digital program to collect behavioral surveys and test results, the state won't even need to be involved in data collection. It can just be done through the companies with whom the state contracts. So that's another thing that's kind of frightening. All right, we have to stop this as parents. Well, why? Well, there are just too many ways for student data to be shared. I mean, you guys have heard about what's happened with NSA and the phones. You've heard about what's happened with Google. You've heard what happened with Target. If you honestly believe that your data is safe, I'm not trying to be mean, but you're deluding yourself. I mean, I do have a smartphone. It's much smarter than I am. That's part of the reason why I have it. It makes me smarter. But here's the problem. It collects a lot of data on me. I am an adult, though. I can say, I accept that. I sign a little thing saying that I accept that. These are children, and you are parents,
Amen.
and sometimes you don't understand that this is being done for children without your permission. So that's the big concern here.
That's right.
Again, student data cannot be protected. It's just what we said. There are obvious ethical problems here. Do you really want to share how many times a kid was in the infirmary that day? I have a child who unfortunately has type 1 diabetes. I would not want that. Wouldn't want all that information being gathered by my healthcare clinic. It just seems not right to me. So you have to kind of make up your mind for yourself. Here's something else. I am a Christian. I am against it on that particular, just as a religious belief. I believe that it's marking. I believe that God is the person that marks me. The state doesn't mark me. So it's very concerning, Christians kind of allowing this, because it is in a way, marking individuals. All right, so what can you do? Here are some just helpful hints to finish out here. Do not use online academies or virtual schools attached to your State Department of Education if you're concerned about data sharing. If you're okay with that, it's fine. I'm not here to tell you all online schools are terrible, nuke them from orbit. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying go into them with open eyes and be educated to know what kind of information they will be taking on your child. If you're a homeschooling family, don't use public school facilities. I don't know where, I am now a homeschooling parent. I pulled my kids out of public school. I don't know why I would want to go back. I mean, there are plenty of homeschool activities out there. I know, and that's flippant, because I know I've got a lot of friends who are even further out than I am, and they have a hard time finding access to things. But we have to be really careful. I put my kids in FFA, crossing my fingers, thinking I don't want this, information getting back. So just use some wisdom there. Do not ever, 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 ever provide your social security number to a school or any other place other than where? The Social Security Administration. As a matter of fact, they've said over and over and over again, you have no business giving the cable company or the energy provider your Social Security number. That's only for Social Security business. Guard that carefully. Contact your senator and representatives and ask them, do they know about the state SLDS? What do they know about it? Because I found that many representatives don't know about it. And certainly when I started trying to educate them in 2010, none of them really knew about this. And if they don't know, educate them. Help legislators bring opt-in legislation. We have 2 bills that we're running. There are actually 7 Common Core bills right now, 2 on the Senate side, 5 on the House. You can follow those on our Facebook page at Restore Oklahoma Public Education, and we post a lot of that there and on our website. We are also working on 2 data bills to try to restrict the ability for states to get access to student information without parental permission. We will need your help to get those bills passed, so please, if you're interested in that, get onto our website, get onto our Facebook page, and make those phone calls. I think we're done. So there you go.
Wow.